can you also say that the government was also not aware that these consultants or these forensic accountants were coming into the country to aid the work of the commission?
As far as I knew, the Ministry of Justice was not aware.
Okay. All right.
I cannot speak for other.
All right, but I think I should have qualified that. What I mean is, did the Ministry of Justice also communicate to the rest of the government or inform perhaps the Office of the President about such a development or support?
I do not recall ever communicating that to anybody.
All right, thank you. So you've also mentioned that when the Ford Foundation arrived in the Gambia, they visited the Ministry of Justice and had somewhat of a tour.
I took them on a tour, personally led the tour, yes.
All right, that's right. The chair of the Commission of Inquiry had testified here before, and he refers to, or I might be wrong here, please correct me if I am. He refers to the forensic accountants, I believe, and perhaps another group, the Americans.
Indeed.
Yeah. Are these when he says the Americans, are these the people he is referring to?
There was the members of the Ford Foundation.
Okay.
But there was also another, the Ford Foundation is not a U.S. government agency. No. But there was...
sorry, let me just clarify. In his testimony, when he referred to the Americans, he did not state whether specifically they are officials. But if you have, please explain more. I just wanted to clarify.
So apart from the Ford Foundation members who visited the country, there was another team of American government officials who came to the country on the invitation of the Gambia government. So basically the Ministry of Justice, I reached out to the American government through the embassy here to look for support. And the support we were looking for is, among other things, how to get back the residents of the former president in the USA, the Potomac residents in Washington. So as part of that process of engaging with the American government to get back that property, they sent the American government, through the U.S. Embassy here, of course, sent us 2 or 3 people from the U.S. government. One, I believe, was from Miami, from the U.S. Office of Kleptocracy or something, was a long title, and 1 or 2 others.
Sorry, would you be able to give this title to the committee after the sitting?
I can try to find that. It's on any U.S. government website, but it's one office of a kleptocracy that's based in Miami, I believe.
Kleptocracy.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Right. The investigators also.
Okay. They came to help us establish the financial links between the Potomac residents and the source of the finances that procured that residence, because they have to link the residents, or they have to demonstrate in U.S. courts that the Potomac residence was procured from the proceeds of a crime. You can't just ask them to seize property without establishing evidence as to the source of funding of that of the property. So they came to do that, but I also think the Americans always have their own interests. So they also came to also perhaps establish or get evidence to bolster their case against one of the former president's close associates, Mr. Mohamed Bazi. So I think it was a combination of those 2 reasons that the U.S. government brought in personnel, but clearly it was at the instance of the Minister of Justice, i.e. myself, who reach out to them so that they can come and help us establish the kind of evidence they would need so that we can get the property that was in the US, which was owned by the former president. This is how the process to recover that property started.
Okay, so these Americans, now we've established there are two groups. Okay.
One was governmental, the other was non-governmental.
All right. The one was the accountants, the consultants, being those ones funded by the Ford Foundation, and then the second group is the U.S. government official.
I cannot recall what the profession of the Ford Foundation delegate was. Usually when I meet delegates, they come, they introduce themselves, etc. with the head. So I don't know whether all of them came or just some came, but I cannot remember what was their profession at that time.
Okay, all right. That's fine. But according to the receiver, he's the one that connected these individuals or this group, or let's say organization, to the commission. He said when he was contacted, it was for forensic accountant to come and aid the work of the commission.
It sounds.
So, yeah.
This is the first time I am getting to know this information.
All right. It was given to the committee by Mr. Barre during his testimony. I believe it's the first day of his testimony.
I don't think I have yet followed Mr. Barre's testimony before this committee.
Yes, that's what he informed. That was one of, perhaps he said that's his first interaction with the Commission of Inquiry.
Okay.
Yes, and the whole process in general. Okay, but let's establish this then, since you're not really sure about the professional backgrounds of these individuals that came from the Ford Foundation. As far as you know, one group of Americans were contacted by whose visit was facilitated by the government of the Gambia, and that is the Agency for, is it Kleptocracy Asset Recovery?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a long title, but
yes,
they were
under
from
the U.S.
different
Department
offices.
of Treasury.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
That's fine. As far as you know, this is the only group that visited the country.
To the best of
with
my
regards
recollection.
to financial dealings of President Jammeh.
To the best of my recollection, yes.
All right. And this is at the invitation of the Ministry of Justice.
It was at my own initiation, yes.
Okay.
Initiative, rather. Sorry.
All right. That's fine. And when do you recall the dates when the whole process started, or even when they arrived in the country?
I don't recall the date, but it was still in the early days when we were trying to source funding for the different activities at the ministry.
All right, but at this time, the commission had already been established.
Oh, absolutely,
Well,
because
into its work.
yes, because they went first to the commission, then they came to me.
When you say they went first to the commission, is it that they started working with the commission already and then they visited the ministry? Or
I don't know when they started working at the commission, but I know that Council Bensouda had contacted me and told me about the presence of the Ford Foundation delegation in the country and that they would like to pay a courtesy call on the ministry. And I granted that. I took that opportunity to also take them around to see how much more they can help.
That's smart.
We had a begging bowl and going around to beg for support.
All right, it's understandable. What type of work did these, I know you've mentioned that what you intended when you contacted the U.S. Embassy, who connected you with this agency, the Department of Treasury, was to help the Gambia government to see how they could recover the Potomac residents.
Yeah.
And any other assets that Jammeh potentially had
in the U.S.
In the U.S.
Yes.
Right? But is there any other help apart from that? Did they render any other help to the government of the Gambia apart from the Potomac residents?
As far as the Ministry of Justice is concerned,
Yes.
no.
Okay.
No.
All right. And do you know what work they did with the Commission of Inquiry when they got to the Gambia?
No, I do not.
You don't know.
Yeah.
I understand. The chair of the commission also, when talking about the Americans, he also mentioned that the Americans scanned documents, or there were documents scanned at the Commission of Inquiry. How, do you know how this came about happening?
I know about the scanner because the Americans did inform me when they visited the government officials. When they finished their assignment and they were going back, they did come by again to say goodbye. That's when they informed me that they had donated a scanner to the commission, the scanner that they were using to scan documents. And which is why I said they were here to help us trace the source of funding for the Potomac residents. But I would not be surprised if they also were at the same time looking for evidence to use against a former close associate of the president, Mr. Mohamed Bazi.
So it is after the fact that you became aware of the scanner.
Well, before they left the country, they informed me about donating a scanner to the
That's
commission.
what I'm saying. After they had scanned documents, that is when you were aware.
I believe so, yes, because
Yes.
they were coming to say goodbye.
Okay. What I'm trying to get at here is whether, because their arrival into the country or their visit into the country was facilitated by your ministry. So now, what I'm interested in knowing here right now is whether you were aware that when they when they arrive in the Gambia, they were going to scan documents.
No,
Or they were going to come with a scanner.
I knew that they were going to conduct research to look into the materials that would help us. How exactly they were going to do that, I didn't know.
Okay. And they never informed you?
No, no, we just referred them to the commission, sent them to the commission, and then they started dealing with the commission therefore.
All right. So can we therefore say that as far as you know, or to the best of your knowledge, as the Attorney General at the time, that the content of the documents that was scanned was not to your knowledge or to the knowledge of your ministry?
No, we didn't know what they scanned and what they did not scan.
And at no point did the Commission of Inquiry also inform the Ministry of Justice about the contents of the documents that were scanned?
Not to my recollection, no.
Okay. So we can say that the official government of the Gambia documents with the Americans, that they basically had freedom, or there was no restrictions into the documents they were collecting.
I cannot say that, but I know if we ask for help, they expect cooperation from us. And that cooperation means providing them access with any information that they deemed relevant for the purposes of exercising judgment on the matter.
Okay. And to your mind, does this not cause any concern for national security, perhaps?
No, we invited them in the first place here to help us.
Yes,
and so you can't
take away.
But you can't ask for help and then you start telling the person, I am not going to give you this set of document or that set. You want help. We gave them access to the documents through the commission, and I don't know what was the relationship between the team of the U.S. government officials and the commission. I cannot determine that now, but I would expect full cooperation from the commission in terms of accessing documents that could lead them to help us.
But it would be documents that would, as far as you expect, limited to the help that you were looking for.
Now, it's a difficult one to
answer. You know why I stated this? It's because the help you're looking for is very specific. That is why I asked you also when you mentioned the Potomac residents, was that whether the help you were looking for was restricted to Potomac and Jammeh's assets that he might have had in the U.S. at the time.
Yes.
So I am assuming if you're asking for help, the help would be restricted to that point or those points?
That's the assumption I also made about the specific nature of the help until when they were leaving, they came to brief me on their work, and they had a laptop open for me with a lot of arrows and lines in different colors from different locations. It's a complicated process. I understand it to be. So it would be a simplistic view to assume that because the request was specific, therefore the documents had to be specific. Tracking assets overseas doesn't work like that, and especially when they're trying to link the sources of funding from one jurisdiction to another. It's more complicated than that.
It's understandable. Yeah. All right, moving forward, the scanner, you mentioned that it was donated to the Commission of Inquiry, correct?
That's what I recall, yes.
Okay, so at the end of the commission, or when the commission completed its work, what happened to the scanner?
I am assuming it would have been sent to the Ministry of Justice together with all the other equipments that we borrowed the commission to use.
You are assuming, or are you?
I can only assume because I didn't receive physical personal custody of.
But of course, you wouldn't be the one receiving personal custody of that, Mr. Tambedou. You have staff for that. Exactly. So, but you would receive information about that ordinarily, wouldn't you?
No, not really, because I expected all the equipment that we bought, because the scanner was one of several equipment that we bought the commission. So I expected all of those equipment to be returned to the ministry.
But the scanner was not lent to the commission by the Minister of Justice.
That's right. It was gifted to the commission, exactly, as I understand it.
And I can recollect from your testimony, was it yesterday or so, where you stated that heavy-duty printers, heavy-duty photocopiers and stuff like that were taken from the Ministry of Justice and given to the Commission of Inquiry to aid its work. But eventually, it would be expected that at the end of the life of the commission, these things would be returned to the Ministry of Justice.
Indeed.
Yes. So this scanner did not come from the Ministry of Justice. It came from another organization, or let's say another government. Yes. And at the end of the life of the commission, anything the commission had in its custody should have been surrendered to the line ministry, being the Ministry of Justice.
Yes.
So, therefore, we can say that the scanner was handed over to the Ministry of Justice, correct?
That's the assumption I will make, absolutely.
And ordinarily, of course, I know such thing may not be handed over to you personally, but who ordinarily would receive or be in receipt of such items?
The administrative head of the ministry would oversee the receipt of the materials back to the ministry.
And that's the Solicitor General?
That would be the Solicitor General, yes.
Very well. Thank you very much.
And his team.
The scanned document, do you know whether, or you did say that a laptop was opened and you looked at a very complex graphs and a very complex document. Was a copy of this items that we have, or documents that we have scanned, was a copy also given to the Minister of Justice?
Well, no. At that point, they were showing me the process of investigation. They hadn't completed their investigation. They were going to go back to conduct additional research into the matter, additional investigation. That's why it took some time before the U.S. government finally decided to act on the Potomac property. It took actually a few years before they finally did.
All right. That's okay. I think that's what I need. Those are the questions I had on that issue. Honorable Jammeh had done a very good job with obtaining the information. He was asking questions and I was looking at my questions and I was thinking, wow,
well, Jammeh
making my job easier for me.
He has a curious mind.
Yes. I think we should invite him into a fraternity. Another issue that I believe you did touch on briefly with either the council was FTI, I believe.
We haven't touched on FTI yet, but I am happy to touch on
Okay,
FTI.
all right. The receiver, Mr. Barry, did testify here and mentioned that, or in the questions asked again, what his interactions were with the government and his interactions with the Commission of Inquiry prior to his appointment were, and he raised two issues. It was, the first one was being the Third Foundation, and the second one was about FTI. He testified here to say that as a consultant, he was contacted by FTI after the change of government because FTI had been an investor in the Gambia years before and was interested in coming back into the Gambia to invest into the hospitality industry, the tourism and the hospitality industry. And what FTI was interested in at the time, he said, was a few things. The first one being trying to lease hotels that were already in operation and then eventually build a hotel or build a series of hotels to operate for itself. And in so doing, he did have interactions with several people in the country. The receiver at the time, that was Augustus Prom, and even the president, and eventually a meeting with yourself. Can you please explain to the committee what your interaction was with Mr. Berry about FTI and FTI itself and the intentions they had for investment at the time?
Back in 2017, after the change, now I am going to, it's by no means intended to offend you, but I want to help so that I know how much information to give, how much not to give. So I'm not sure if you knew about FTI before, back when they were first in the country. I believe around 1996-97, those who were here would remember they were very, very present in the country. And I had fond memories of their time because I used to play football in those days, and they used to sponsor Steve Biko, a football team in Bakau. Knew a lot about FTI's activities at that time. So when the change occurred and...
Yes, Honorable Chair.
You're talking about FTI. FTI.
Yes.
Which of the FTI?
The hotel management company. I know we dealt with two companies that are, yes, but this is the hotel management company.
Oh, there's another FTI?
Yes.
Okay. This one is Future Touristic something. Yes, they are a very large European.
Yes. When the receiver was here, we dealt with two companies called FTI.
Okay.
The names are similar, but
I know of only one. I know of only one FTI,
okay,
which is the tourism FTI. So I recall at the time when the change had occurred, and I was informed by a colleague, a cabinet colleague. I can't remember now exactly who. It might have been the Minister of Tourism. I'm not sure. I can't confirm that, but certainly the information came to me that FTI wanted to come back to this country to invest in the tourism sector, and that they wanted the government to allocate it land where they could build a 5-star hotel. In fact, a meeting was held in the cabinet room, I recall, with a few other cabinet colleagues, together with representatives from FTI. At that time, the government had already frozen all the properties of the former president, including land that was located in the TDA, the Tourism Development Area. But FTI were advised to go around to look at the landscape and to identify a suitable area for this 5-star hotel. I guess as a new government coming on the back of high hopes, we were all excited. We wanted to prove a point. We were all eager. We wanted to create jobs, etc., so that people will see that this government is serious, etc. So we were all keen to help and excited. And so I advised that we had frozen the land, and that the government had set up a commission of inquiry for 3 months. Then the government can deal with TDA land as it saw fit. Those 3 months became 6 months. 6 months became 9 months. At some point, I believe because of the lack of progress in terms of the end of the commission of inquiry, representatives of FTI were sent to me in my office. I believe it was the Minister of Tourism who requested for me to receive them. I can't remember now exactly whether that was the case, but certainly they did come to see me. And that was the first time I met Mr. Barry in person, and this was in 2018. Before that, I had known about him. It's a small country. I knew some of his family members, and if I am not mistaken, or I might have met Mr. Njai before that, certainly. So he came with Mr. Njai, Mr. Mustafa Njai Taf, and maybe 1 or 2 other people who I can't remember now. But I believe they were either foreigners or Gambian and a foreigner. But anyway, the delegation came to see me, and because they were referred to me by, I believe, the Minister of Tourism, so that they can find out how much longer it's going to take for the commission to wrap up, so that these lands can be unfrozen and FTI would be allocated an appropriate place to build their 5-star hotel. That was my first interaction with Mr. Barry. And we discussed FTI. Now, I don't recall the part about leasing hotels. I don't personally recall that part. But I certainly recall the part about when the commission would end, when the TDA lands would be unfrozen, so that the government can allocate an appropriate piece for FTI to build their 5-star hotel. That one I certainly recall.
Right. Just to provide clarity for you about when the chair asked FTI, the forensic accountants that came to the Gambia, funded by the Ford Foundation, are so-called FTI. FTI Consulting.
I didn't even know the name or anything.
So those are the 2 FTIs we discussed. All right. So that was the one meeting you had with FTI or its representatives about the leasing of land.
There were 2 meetings. One was in my office with the delegation, and I believe the one before that was in the cabinet office together with other ministers, again with the FTI representatives, on a different date.
Okay, so the cabinet meeting, they were also present with the cabinet ministers?
It was not with all the cabinet ministers.
Okay, some of them.
It was just in the cabinet room with some of the ministers who were concerned. So it would have been tourism, lands, and justice, maybe another ministry, and then, of course, representatives from the office of the president. So maybe the secretary general would have been there.
Would have been there.
Yes.
All right. That is clear now. With regards to hotels and in general, let me just ask this question. During the receivership, when during Augustus Prom's receivership, the term of the receivership, in their testimony here, or in his testimony here, certainly Prom mentioned having meetings or having conversations with you specifically about the 2 hotels owned by Social Security, being Ocean Bay and Sunset, I believe, Hotel.
Yes.
In Dakar.
That is correct.
Yes. Why was this of interest to the Ministry of Justice or to you as the Attorney General at the time? Why did you think it was necessary to engage Mr. Prom or the firm itself about these hotels, considering they were already under receivership?
I was requested by cabinet to do so.
It was a cabinet decision.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it was not out of the blue.
I wouldn't have any personal interest in those 2 hotels.
Okay, so what was your instruction and what was the conversation you had with Augustus Prom at the time about these 2 hotels?
I don't now recall the order in which they occurred, but I know that the managing director of Social Security at the time, Mr. Mohammed Majang, came to see me about those 2 hotels as well.
Okay.
I don't know whether that meeting took place before the cabinet discussion on the 2 hotels, so I can't really. But there were 2 meetings, as far as I was concerned, on the hotels.
All right.
Mohammed Majang came to see me.
So perhaps tell us, considering you mentioned the cabinet meeting first.
Okay.
Tell us about the cabinet meeting first, and then you can tell us about Mr. Majang.
The cabinet discussions came in the context of some other discussions, and I believe, I don't recall now who started the discussion, but the idea was that these 2 hotels, which belong to Social Security, should now be returned to Social Security. So the Social Security should would do as they please. It's their hotel. And so cabinet requested me to reach out to Augustus Prom as receiver and to request for Augustus Prom to hand over those 2 hotels back to Social Security. Which I agreed to do because I fully supported that. Said which I agreed to do because I also fully supported that.
All right. So these hotels were placed under Augustus Prom's custody, I believe, by the 2nd order of the High Court, not the 1st order, because of Westwood. Is it Westwood International? Let me just get that.
Just clarify that for me. Were these 2 hotels placed in the custody, in the receivership of Augustus Prom, or was it the commission that did so?
Actually, you are right. It's the commission that did.
I believe it was the commission that did so.
So when the commission placed the, actually, I need to verify this.
Okay.
Because, but tell us about Mr. Manjang's.
Yes. Mr. Manjang also came to see me as managing director of Social Security at the time with the same request. They wanted Augustus Prom to give back the hotels to Social Security so that Social Security would decide on the future management of the hotel as they saw fit. It was their investment.
Okay. And then did you give assurances that these hotels were going to be returned, or did you say, what did you say?
I never give assurances if I am making a request.
Okay.
Because a request presupposes that it could be denied. And that is exactly what happened in this case.
Okay. And when Augustus Prom denied this request, what was your next course of action?
First, I invited Augustus Prom to my office.
That was the first time you had the conversation about the hotel?
Yes.
Okay.
And like I said, I believe I met Augustus Prom twice throughout the receivership. The first was when I was offering him the receivership. The second was to discuss some issues, maybe 2 or 3 issues, but including the issue of the hotels. I met them 3 times, and towards the end, when we were informing them that we will no longer renew the mandate. So that was the 3rd time. So at least on 3 occasions we met. But on the 2nd occasion when we met, I conveyed this request to them that they should hand over these hotels back to Social Security. They raised concerns, and this is, and I have seen a part of Louis' testimony on this, when he says we were asking them to do something illegal. Unfortunately, council did not push back on that, but describing something like that as illegal was inappropriate. But maybe because Mr. Prom doesn't have a legal background and people like to use these terms loosely, but we were not asking Mr. Prom to do anything illegal. Now, in Mr. Prom's view, there could have been, that action could have exposed them to court action, which we also understood and appreciated. But just because one may be exposed to court action doesn't mean one will not take that action. If your action is defendable and justifiable in court, Why not? And we were going to defend and provide Mr. Trump with a defense in court. And that in any event, they were already in court. They were dragged to court by, I believe, BPI or those who were managing the two hotels at the time. So it
actually by several.
They were dragged to court by several other parties, I think, including this. So I don't know what they were afraid of. In any event, they expressed their concern over it. And I tried to persuade them that there was nothing to fear, that the government was going to defend any action that was taken against them. They didn't feel comfortable. They didn't feel comfortable going along with it. I left it there. I didn't do anything else.
You didn't put pressure on them?
An attorney general of a country can be a very powerful person, and putting pressure will get results. I am not the kind who puts pressure on people.
But you had more than one conversation about these hotels with Augustus Trump.
If I recall, the only meeting I had with them to request for them to hand over these hotels was just one meeting.
I said conversation.
I could have had a conversation with them at the end when they were being told that their mandate would no longer be extended. But yes, those were the conversations that I might have had with them on these two hotels. And to be honest, to this day, I still don't understand why they took that decision at the time. Social Security is a state-owned enterprise. It's a public body. It's owned by taxpayers, pensioners, and if we have the hotel which was leased under dubious circumstances to some dubious actors, and the government wanted to take action to give those hotels back to its owners, why not? It was a public body. So I didn't understand the reluctance, but I didn't put pressure nevertheless. I allowed them to exercise their independent judgment.
But Mr. Tambedou, you can appreciate their concerns and why they were being careful about this issue. The hotels itself and Social Security, the hotels and Social Security itself were also subject to the inquiry, the investigations of the Commission of Inquiry. So you can understand or at least appreciate why perhaps people with non-legal background would be concerned or careful when it came to issues that are placed on the receivership, or assets that are placed on the receivership, but also subject to the inquiry of the Commission.
Yes, and I don't think the Commission...
Social Security in general was quite,
yes,
as you've seen here,
but I don't think
we've had, it's quite controversial at the time.
Yes, but I don't think the Commission would have had any objection to that. The government certainly did not, and I can understand their concerns, but if those concerns are allayed by the government, when we told them that if an action is brought against them, in the same way that others were bringing other actions, it was not like this was the first time they were being dragged to court as receivers, the government would have certainly provided a defense for them, because it was in the national interest to take back those hotels from that group of people.
But Mr. Tambedou, you can see, or I'm sure you do know, that when Augustus Trump was being dragged to court, these actions, they had to engage the services of a lawyer.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So when you say that the Attorney General's chambers would have provided support or a defense, what exactly are you talking about?
Well, when they were being dragged to court, they hired the services of a lawyer that they were paying from the income generated from the receivership. So it wasn't coming from their own pocket. And two, the Attorney General was always dragged as a nominal party to those proceedings. So we would have been there with Augustus Trump all the way, step by step.
Was this communicated to the firm?
But of course, that's what I just said here. I did assure them that we would defend any actions that they were concerned about. They, of course, didn't budge, so I allowed them to exercise their judgment.
Very well, Mr. Tambedou. We might circle back on this issue, but let's move on. We do not have a lot of time today. Another issue I want to just clear up, it's already been opened, or it has already been touched on, was the inventory or the work of the Registrar General after the High Court order was delivered. He has testified here, or the Registrar General at the time, he has testified here that one of the first things he did was to gather stakeholders that the High Court order had mentioned, even though it was not all of them, but basically what his intentions were and the actions he eventually took was to visit these farms owned by, or said to be owned by the former president, visit the home in Kanilai, and visited the properties in Banjul and other areas, and took inventory in some of these locations, or where he found some items that he believed were also supposed to be protected at the time. In Kanilai, he found different items. In Sifo, sorry, not Sifo, he found nothing in Sifo, but in Parato and in Banjulinding, he found domestic animals, and of course in Kanilai, he also found wild animals. But in his visits and in the inventory taking, he had informed this committee that anytime he had completed a visit, he would update you specifically. Usually he said he would walk into your office. Do you recall these updates, receiving these updates? Eventually, we did see that there were memos written in certain occasions, especially after the inventory in these three farms that I've mentioned.
As a matter of practice, when I was AG, I literally had an open door policy. My office door was never closed. It was only closed when I was having meetings with outsiders. But otherwise, you walk into my secretary, you will see my door was always open. And so ministry staff would walk in and walk out as they saw fit in those days. And that was deliberate because I wanted them to have access to me to facilitate exchange of information. So yes, Mr. Jallo made the most of that access. He would come occasionally to brief me. When the briefing was too much, I would send him to the Solicitor General to brief the Solicitor General.
Too much briefing.
It happens sometimes.
Very well.
Mr. Jallo is a very excitable person.
I won't comment on that, but
it's not a bad thing to be excitable.
Definitely not. But eventually, you received memos and information about all of his activities, as he was supposed to as well.
Yes, he used to give me briefings and send memos.
Mr. Jallo also engaged in an eviction exercise, which I will say was not very fruitful, even though at some point I think he did get the results he wanted. but then later on he would also be the one to taint the results he wanted. Were you? I will
not sure.
explain.
Be specific.
Sure.
It's okay.
No. So what I first want you to give an answer to is, were you aware of the eviction exercise that he engaged in?
Yes, I was aware that he was serving eviction notices to properties that had occupants.
And apart from serving notices, did you also know that or did he inform you that he did actually evict some of the some of the occupants of these properties?
I wouldn't be surprised if he did, because the notices should be followed by implementation. I don't recall specific reports to me that they are evicting people, but I expected that to occur as a matter of course.
In his exercise, Mr. Jallo evicted the family or family members of the former president from his mother's home in Porto. And now the reason why I said Mr. Jallo achieved the results and tainted his own results was that he said after he evicted them, he felt sorry for them. And against the instructions he had received from the Ministry of Justice, when he evicted them from the president's mother's home, he went and lodged them in another home around the neighborhood that was also owned by the former president, which as well was empty at the time, but also was just part of the property that was going to be a subject of the commission's inquiry, but also part of the properties that were placed in his custody. Were you aware of this?
No, I was not aware of this particular situation, but Mr. Jallo would have been a victim of Gambianness, which happens to all of us. No, I guess he was swayed by humanitarian reasons, and I say this with all modesty because I was also amongst those, and I will confess to this, who for reasons of sympathy and humanitarianism didn't take action that I ought to have taken in respect of one of those properties. And this is a property that the government forfeited after the commission report with the white paper, which belonged to General Saul Bagi. But his own mother was still living in that property. And I felt compelled to leave the mother there in that home and not to evict her until later. So if you're blaming Mr. Jallo for acting as a humanitarian, then blame me as well for this action, because I also was a culprit of the same conduct. I didn't evict General Saul Bagi's mother from her home, even though that property was forfeited to the state. She was an old woman, I understood.
You gave instructions so that the old lady would not be evicted.
Yes.
Who were these instructions given to? Was it Mr. Jallo also?
At the time, no, this was not Mr. Jallo. This was when the government had forfeited the properties through the white paper. So it would have been, well, I guess it was, what we did was we didn't include the property amongst the ones that the receiver was to dispose of. We reserved it, if you like.
Okay, so for your own action was after the white paper?
After the white paper, yes.
However, Mr. Jallo's own action was during the life of the commission.
Well, I'm sure he felt sympathetic to the family. These things happen. We're all Muslims and Christians in this country. Sometimes the soft side of you gets the better of you. That's why it's difficult and complex to work as a professional in this country. It's extremely difficult.
Noted. Was this also the Gambianness and the humanitarian in you? Is this the reason why when Mr. Fati had difficulties in Vigilo with Mr. Saul Bagi's property, that was being occupied by Aisha Fati at the time. Was this the reason why you also asked him not to?
I don't think
go
Mr.
back
Ja
there?
I don't think, or ask him not to go back there. No, that was not the reason.
Okay.
I'll give you the reason in this case. There were three reasons. Mr. Jallo came to report to me that when they went to serve the notice of eviction on Ms. Aisha Fati, who was occupying one of the properties believed to be owned by General Solbaji, and that Ms. Fati brandished a letter on the letterhead of the Gambia National Army, and that he was not convinced about that letter, and that he was going to act on the eviction notice and evict Ms. Fati subsequently. So I told him not to do so. I instructed him not to do so. And I believe on Wednesday or yesterday I gave my reasons for that, but I will repeat them for you since you asked. I'll give those reasons since you asked, but I gave them, I think, before, and they were based on three factors. First, I received the call from Ms. Fati's lawyer. I believe it was Mr. Abdullah Sisaho, who informed me that Ms. Fati is claiming title to the property and that he would send correspondence with proof of that title to me. Of course, in the spirit of collegiality, I had to consider that. So that was the first reason. The second reason was that the letter that Ms. Fati brandished to Mr. Jallo, as Mr. Jallo confirmed, had the letterhead of the Gambia National Army. Now, out of respect for the institution of the army, because I do not yet at that point in time know the contents of that letter, but I wouldn't summarily dismiss a letter from either the army or any other armed or security services in this country, out of respect for their institutions. And I think we should all get into the habit of according that respect to our men and women in uniform for the sterling job that they do to keep us all safe. And so it was out of respect for the institution of the army that I wanted to examine further what the content of that letter was before we could act on the eviction notice. And the third reason why I asked Mr. Jallo not to follow up on the eviction notice was, now I've lost for the first time my train of thought here. But in any event, the property was not going to go away, and we wanted to examine the contents of the letter that she had before we could decide whether we should proceed or not. And the third reason, of course, I guess it was not, it is linked to the second reason, but it's because I saw the exchange between Mr. Jallo and Honorable Jammeh here, when Honorable Jammeh was questioning whether that letter was sufficient to show title. And I was just saying to Honorable Jammeh the other day that, and you can help me here since you're more fresh from law school than I am, I'm getting rusty with my land law, but that agreements for the sale or transfer of land must be in writing or be evidenced in writing, and that evidence can come in different forms. And so because of that principle as well, I thought it would be prudent to wait to see the contents of that letter before action was taken. So that's why Mr. Jallo was told to delay the implementation of the eviction notice.
Very good reasoning, but you know what I'm concerned about is when you said evidence of land ownership should be in writing and the army, but the army doesn't sell land, does it?
Well, you know, I said agreements for the sale or transfer of land must be in writing or evidence in writing. So it's the second limb, the evidence in writing that I'm referring to, because that evidence can come in different ways. It doesn't have to be one evidence, it can be a number of evidence put together to demonstrate title. You will be surprised, Council, as well, that if I take the example of Social Security, when they sell land, first they issue you with an allocation letter before they process your lease. So that allocation letter, again, is evidence, right, pointing towards ultimate title. But I wanted to see what the contents of that letter was first and foremost before we could take action. I didn't want to dismiss a letter from the army without considering it.
Did you eventually see the letter?
By the time we get to the point where the eviction notice will be implemented, the JANNEH Commission had taken over.
That's right, because Mr. Jallo did also mention that he was also contacted by that you were not the only one to ask him to stop his activities concerning that property, but also the chair of the commission asked him to stop.
I guess I asked him to not to implement the eviction order while we consider the contents of the letter and the claim by the council to Ms. Fati, Mr. Abdullah Sisaho, as to title.
Did the council ever forward these documents here?
The council wrote. The council wrote to me. I recall Council Sisaho writing to me. But it was just a letter. It was not accompanied by any evidence of title, if you like.
And then what did you do? Did you respond to that letter?
I don't recall now, but I think the letter didn't stop us from acting. But like I said, the commission took over at some point before we, maybe before the expiry of the eviction notice as well. I don't know. I can't remember how long the eviction notice was for, but I made sure that they were giving long notices.
All right, but this property was subject to the investigations and inquiry of the commission. Am I correct?
It should have been, it would have been, and I think it was forfeited to the state subsequently, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
The recommendation made by the commission regarding that property.
Yeah.
But you know the concern, and I believe both Honorable Jammeh's concerns and the committee's concerns were that these properties were subject to inquiry. There was a court order already vesting their custody and control to the Registrar General. And at the time, the Registrar General was Mr. Ali Jallo.
That's right.
And now, being a little bit lenient or being a humanitarian with regard to the property, both Kotu and what happened in Kotu and what happened in Bijulo is sort of taints the process in a bad, or sheds, a bad light on the entire process. And the difference between you, the actions you took with General Paul Badge's mother, was that your actions came after the commission. So there was in no way where your actions could change the process. It was already at the end of the process, right? Even though as such we can ask questions and say, why did you do that? But it was at least at the time the end of the process. And then when we see, because to my mind, and I'm sure you would agree with me that in as much as these investigations were being carried out and the Ministry of Justice and the Commission of Inquiry were sure that they would have adverse findings against Jammeh, President Jammeh and his associates, you still wanted to implement a smooth and a transparent inquiry, and as well as the orders of the High Court would be executed also in a smooth and transparent way. Therefore, if even though Mr. Jallo was kind enough to find another lodging for President Jammeh's family, but he still did evict them, and he said he did have very heated conversations with them the numerous times that he visited. But like I said, the actions taken here does shed a little of a bad light on the process.
I don't think so, Council. I mean, I won't comment on Mr. Jallo's actions vis-à-vis the Kotu property, but certainly with respect to Aisha Fati, first, this was at this notice stage. So there is a period between the serving of the notice and the implementation of the notice. And so maybe we were having this exchange prematurely before the time for the notice to be implemented. But in any event, these were exchanges that relate to the future implementation of the eviction order.
Sorry to interrupt you. Maybe I left this part of my submission out, but it was, according to Mr. Jallo, this was not just a notice period. He had already started the eviction process, and had already evicted the occupants in court. Yes, eventually, of course, he did also go to another property he was asked to secure, and then gave them access to stay, but this was during eviction.
If I remember the chronology of events correctly, to start with, I only had one discussion with Mr. Jallo on this issue, in the presence of the Solicitor General, actually, as well. And if I recall correctly, the chronology of events, this would have been at the stage when Mr. Jallo was serving notice. But even assuming that it was at the stage of implementation, which would you rather have? You take action, evict an occupant from a property that's not moving, which is fixed, and then you get sued subsequently and found liable for not taking caution in the exercise of your functions, or you settle the issue of title first and foremost before you act on the notice. Now, I would like to think that I am a cautious person, so I would err on the side of caution in a case like that, because the property was not going anywhere anyway, and make sure that the issue of title is resolved to my satisfaction before we could act on the notice.
Well, going by what you just said now, then why was Mr. Jallo instructed to even evict the occupant? What couldn't the Ministry of Justice just allow these occupants to, stay in these houses, these shops, all these places, and then even just wait for the Commission's report and eventually the publication of the government's white paper?
This will be my answer to you. Imagine we did that. Imagine the property was in a state it was in a very good state, and the freezing order was issued, and we didn't implement the freezing order in terms of preserving the assets, and we allowed the occupants to stay in, and in that period, dilapidate the entire property and reduce its value. You, as you are doing now, will be sitting there telling me that our inaction has caused the state losses because it has devalued the property at that point in time. That's what you would have been saying by now.
Definitely.
So now you're asking me to do exactly.
So why, okay, so is it that you thought perhaps the president's relatives would dilapidate the properties in Porto, but then Ms. Fati would not dilapidate the property in Vijay?
No, Ms. Fati claimed title. It's different. There was, in one case, we have someone who's claiming title. In another case, there was no one claiming title. And in any event, even if there were other properties where people were claiming title in the same way as Ms. Fati, believe me, we would have erred on the side of caution.
So let's say, the orders of the High Court, all of them, or at least the first few, seen that they were served on the former president through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Yes, attempts were made to serve him.
Yes. So do we now say that had he responded to the service and actually maybe filed a counterclaim or responded to a response to the motions filed. And perhaps if he at that point had challenged the title again, would his family be allowed to stay?
But the former president was the subject of the application. His party was a private citizen. It's different. We would not infringe upon the rights of private citizens over claims of...
We can see that eventually the property was...
Yes, when that was established. But at that point in time, as a private citizen, we within the state would not want to interfere with the rights of private citizens. There was no suit against his party. The application was against the former president.
Even though Mr. Jallo, as the Registrar General at the time, was the one that was given custody and control of assets. So my question now is, why did Mr. Jallo then go to that property at all?
I don't understand when you say, why did he go to the property? He was serving notices on these properties.
Yes, but you just stated that property was not part of property the freezing orders would cover.
The freezing order covered a list of properties that was attached to the application. And that list might have included properties purportedly belonging to not just the former president, but his close associates such as General Solbay.
Very well then. I believe we can move on from this point now. The inventory, especially when it came to the assets found, because Mr. Jallo's inventory was more than just animal. They included vehicles, they included different items, household items, building materials, so on and so forth. Yesterday, I can recall from your testimony, you spoke about hearing the word cannibalization for the first time when it came to power.
Well, yes, in relation to machines.
Exactly, me too. This committee that made me aware of that word being used for inanimate objects. But these vehicles that were found, or because the order also placed all these vehicles in Mr. Jallo's custody, or the Registrar General's custody, because it said movable and immovable assets. It's very wide.
But I had distinguished the different assets and why that was an umbrella provision in the event any of the other specific assets were not captured.
I know in relation to Parks and Wildlife and in relation to Gilma, that's the Gambia Livestock Marketing Agency, you did tell this committee that you did not expect that you had to follow up with them, or
But did you expect that I had to, as the Minister of Justice, under what
definitely
authority?
it was not about authority or not, but if you
But the
seek an
minister is a
order,
legal officer,
let me
so-
complete what I'm saying.
No, but
If you apply for an order from the High Court,
yes,
the High Court it grants the order.
yes.
You were to ensure that the order is executed, isn't it? You're the one asking for the order.
I'm asking for the order on behalf of the government. So the government was to ensure that the order was complied with, including all the departments of the government that were affected by the order. The Ministry of Justice did not have an overarching responsibility over the government.
Of course, but we're the government's representative in this matter.
Yes, so we
Exactly.
so we filed,
I'm not going to circle back on this point.
but we filed a case on behalf of the government so that the government can implement the order.
I believe the committee and Mr. Diba have dealt with this issue thoroughly. So
Because Council, it's
I'm-
important.
Let me finish. what I'm
Okay,
saying.
sorry.
So I'm not going to go back and forth. The reason why I just pointed this out is because it's in relation to the Registrar General at the depot.
Yeah. But it's
Especially
important
the
to
people-
also establish the legal response, because this is about law. It's not about what we think, about what was moral, etc. This is about the law.
Exactly
Legally-
why we believe that there is perhaps not to these departments in general, but ministry to ministry can communicate I mean, you're meeting at cabinet and all of this.
Yes, communicate, absolutely.
But
That
so
we also did.
my question here now is, you do state that you were aware of Mr. Jallo's inventory taking and visits across the...
I actually instructed him
Exactly.
to take the inventory.
So now, when you learned about the cannibalization of these people,
The tractors.
sorry, the tractors, from the Commission of Inquiry,
That's right.
right, after you received communication from the lead counsel,
Yes.
did it not occur to you or cause concern that these tractors that were being cannibalized had also been the subject of Mr. Jallo's inventory?
Was I not concerned?
Yes. At that point, you know, when you just learn about what is happening to these tractors, and then Mr. Jallo had been, I mean, now had taken inventory, visited these places,
Yes.
and all of that,
Yes.
and had a report or an inventory stock taking report ready.
Yes.
Did it not cause any concern? Did you ever call in Mr. Jallo to discuss this issue with him?
To discuss what issue when the commission informed me that the tractors
Yes,
were
what
being
was
cannibalized.
happening? Yes, what was happening to those tractors?
What would have been the point of having that discussion with Mr. Yah? For him to do what?
To perhaps inform you about the state of the tractors at the time he went to take an inventory.
But the commission has already informed me about the state of the tractors before and after and why they were concerned about leaving the tractors as they were.
I think you're missing my point. My
Maybe
point
I am.
here is that Mr. Jallo,
Yes.
before the commission did its own finding
Yes.
with regards to these tractors, Mr. Jallo had also done his own finding.
I'm not sure Mr. Jaro
Inventory
took
taking.
an inventory of the tractors.
It was when he
can't
set out
confirm.
to do, in his testimony, when he set out to do his work,
Yes.
it was not specifically for the tractor,
Uh-huh.
but because he visited numerous places,
Yes.
he saw these tractors.
Yes.
He also included them in his inventory taking.
Yes.
I don't know whether you recall, Mr. Jallo has submitted memos to you and the Solicitor General, and then I don't know whether you do recall the contents of these inventory taking, but the tractors were part of it, especially the tractors that were eventually sold by the commission in Kanilai and in the other part.
You know, Council, this approach would suggest that we had nothing else to do except Jammeh's assets and the tractors and the livestock.
Mr. Tambedou, with all due respect, of course, I will not expect that the only thing the ministry had to do at the time was focus on Jammeh.
So we have to contextualize these things. So if you tell me whether I had time, whether I had discussed tractors, I had discussed livestock with Mr. Jallo, you know, it detaches from the reality at the time. I have said, and I will say again, for as long as I am here, that the assets, the livestock, and the were not at the top of my priority list at that time. But in any event, I instructed Mr. Jallo to make an inventory of the assets that were found in Kanilai especially. Now, I received communication from the commission that the tractors that were assembled in different locations throughout the country, you'll be surprised to learn that some of them were assembled at police stations.
I'm not surprised.
At police stations, and yet still they were being cannibalized. So, when the information came to me, and that information came to me in response to the government's request for the commission to defer the sale, that's when they said to me that, look, the longer we wait, the less value these tractors are going to have because the parts were being stolen and they would be worthless soon if nothing was done. But I cannot even remember if Mr. Jallo included tractors in his inventory.
Now I'm jogging your memory to say that he did.
No, I don't remember. He might have. I'm not ruling it out, but I don't remember.
No, but he might have. We've seen this in, we've seen these inventories, and they are part of it.
And by the way, for you to know, the first time I actually took a cursory look at that inventory was when it was requested by the National Assembly, and I shared it with them at the time. And I didn't even look at all of it because it was quite bulky. But I had never had the time or the interest to go through that inventory because there were others who were doing that. Again, I was focused on more other priority areas of governance at the time, not about the tractors and the livestock. And when we say livestock, we dress it. It's about cows and sheep and goats. They were not at the top of my priority list.
They are livestock.
Yes, so
quite valuable. They generated some income for the government.
The peace and stability of this country was far more valuable than any livestock at that point.
But you know, when you say that, I feel like you are trying to minimize the value and the importance of those assets for the government, for the country, because these assets were the subject of the inquiry, right? Were they more valuable assets? Yes, they were, but we still, even if it was too good, the fact that you included them and thought that they were necessary to be included in your application to the court means that their value is of importance to the government. So when you talk about goats and cows and sheep,
I'm trying to help to contextualize these issues. And let me just...
You make it seem so frivolous.
Compared to what we faced as a country at the time, when we were on the verge of violent conflict, yes, they were frivolous. We had people leaving this country, seeking refuge in neighboring countries. We were on the verge of conflict.
At the time you made these applications, everybody was back. Mr. Tambedou.
3 months after everybody was back, you think the country was rosy and dandy and everything was fine.
Mr. Tambedou, my point here, and it's so unfortunate that you're missing it, is that the government thought it was very important to recover the loss this country had faced, financial loss this country had faced when President Jammeh was still in the government. And the government thought it's important to recover this. And everybody in this country, and I'm sure even non-Gambian international partners also thought it, or still hold this view that it's important to recover the loss or try to recover the loss. Of course, it will be almost impossible to recover all the loss that the country had faced, but with the way you're talking, you minimize it to a point that makes me question, okay, so why was the Commission of Inquiry or the JANNEH Commission, the first commission that the government of the Gambia decided to establish when it came into power in 2017?
Let me be clear. I think there is value in what the government did in trying to preserve the assets to enable the country to recover. And you're quite right, I don't think we can ever recover everything that was misappropriated by former President Jammeh, but we could do our best, which is why we did the application and we set up the commission, not just to recover, but also to inspire institutional reforms and strengthen checks and balances that would permit future governments or prevent future governments from abusing the system as former President Jammeh did. But my comments here are to contextualize what the competing interests we had to deal with at that time. We were dealing with issues of security and peace and justice and stability. And I think that was a priority for everyone in this country. Because without those fundamental issues, nobody will even have time to think about the livestock. I.e., you don't want me to mention cows and goats and sheep. Nobody will have time to think about those. So my ministry was preoccupied with those processes that would ensure that there was sustainable peace and stability in our environment before we could actually even think of something else. So you have to give what I am telling you a perspective. I do not mean to devalue the livestock and the tractors, etc. But I'm saying in the context, at the time, they were not high up my priority list. So I keep saying that in order not to appear to minimize the values, but I think our peace and stability was far more valuable to anybody in this country at the time.
Very well.
And having said that, if you don't mind, if I just add, and we're also looking at it from a resources perspective. If I had little resources at the time and I had to give priority to these activities, I clearly prioritize issues of governance and reforms, etc. And again, that is why I said at that time, we could not even afford as a ministry to prosecute the NIA personnel who were arrested and who were being tried, because that means taking away from our resources that we needed on more sustainable governance issues to something that was equally important, but really, in the grand scheme of things, was not a priority on my plate. So I had to deal with it. And with the resources I had, I couldn't. I outsourced it. So just so you understand that if I were in a position to even outsource a matter as important as prosecuting intelligence officers, then really think about whether I had the resources to focus on monitoring and supervising the livestock and the other assets that the former president had, particularly the movable ones. And so if I had an entity like the commission that was taking over that aspect, I was very pleased that they were at the time. So Mr. Jallo, coming back to your issue, was drawing up an inventory, and when the commission was taking over the tractors, I don't see what else we could have done on that. I was happy to allow the commission to cover that.
Mr. Tambedou, these were the issues that I just wanted to circle back on from the questions asked or put to you by the committee members earlier today and the previous day. Now we will get into your testimony.
Okay.
So, like I said before we started, that one of the main issues I wanted to start with today was the reporting of the Commission of Inquiry. The Commission of Inquiry, after numerous extensions, numerous convincing of the National Assembly.
It was tough at times, I have to say.
I can tell because I've read in the various, not the Hansard, but in the various evidence or witnesses we've had, and each submitting documentation to the committee. I've seen a letter, or I've read a letter from you to the Commission of Inquiry, which I believe was written in frustration. Perhaps maybe the National Assembly had given you a tough time when you came for extension, so you decided to go and, let me write this letter and
everyone
tell
was
the
giving
Commission what I'm facing as well.
everyone was giving me a tough time. They were pulling me but different directions.
Yes. So
Everyone.
I read this letter and I was like, this man must have been frustrated at this time.
Why do you think I left?
But I'm not going to get into that letter. But I'm sure when the commission eventually contacted you to tell you we are done, reports are done, you must have signed in relief that the whole entire process was done and you don't have to come and face that. You don't have to come and face the National Assembly again for extension. But yes, my question now, when we get to now that we are at reporting, is what was the first course of action for the Ministry of Justice after the defeat period?
After the report was submitted to His Excellency the President,
Yeah.
we set out to review the report and, of course, to draft the government white paper so that it could be reviewed by the President and Cabinet and then published if the President so desired.
Did you say for the white paper to be published if the President desired?
Yes. So when we started reviewing the report, like I said, and to prepare to draft the white paper for Cabinet's consideration and ultimate publication should the President desire.
I think when you say desire, perhaps qualify it because the public is listening.
Okay.
That if the President, where the President does not publish a white paper, it's because
It
they
gives,
are there's a qualifier.
that's
in the
right, it is
Constitution.
qualified. So the President does not automatically have to publish the white paper. If the President deems it necessary not to publish the white paper for national security reasons, then the President will not, but he will provide those reasons.
Exactly. So
Yes.
let's just put that qualifier for the public.
It's important,
And for the
absolutely.
record. Yes.
So we set out to start reviewing the JANNEH Commission report.
All right. So let me just when because you were in constant communication with the National Assembly at the time, the Commission of Inquiry, everybody had concerns on when is this going to end. Did the Commission perhaps notify the Ministry of Justice before, when we started its report writing process, or at least when it was done with its report, to say that we are about to submit our report to the President?
I'm not sure whether what they said to me was specific to the issue of report writing, etc., but I know certainly that there was a time when they informed me that the report would be ready. And that was a promise, that was the information that I conveyed to the National Assembly and promised never to come back here to seek for remuneration. Only for me to be told later that there was going to be another extension of 3 months so that they can wrap up. That was perhaps one of the most difficult moments between myself and the National Assembly because they were not going to entertain that request. In the end, it ended well. So all's well that ends well.
But it was a difficult time.
It was always a difficult time for me, trust me, in government, at the National Assembly, at the Commission, all over.
Don't expect the office of the Attorney General to be one that is easy to shoulder.
Especially in those days,
Exactly.
we were in the eye of the storm, if I can put it that way.
Very well. So eventually, the Commission, like you said, submitted its report in March 2019 to the President, and then another job started for the Ministry of Justice, which was to review this report.
At the same time that we were also setting up the other commissions.
That's
that were
correct.
coming.
So
Yes.
can you just explain the process of the reviewing of reports and the drafting of the white paper?
The report was shared with the Solicitor General, myself, I had a copy, and I believe the Director of Civil Litigation. So these were the 3 that I believe had copies of the report so that the 3 of us would work on the white paper.
Okay, so working on the white paper involved or you were part of the people that drafted the white paper?
I used to,
Was it just delegated to the Department of Civil Education?
I was responsible for a substantial part of the review and drafting of the white paper. This is where I said, I think 2 days ago, that I used to spend the weekends in the office until 5 a.m. in the morning, just before Fajr, and then we go home, because I was personally involved in reviewing the reports and drafting the white paper.
How long did the process take?
The constitution gives the government 6 months.
And you made use of the whole thing?
Oh yes, there were 9 volumes. How long did it take you to go through the JANNEH Commission report?
Definitely not.
You're a lucky generation, I keep saying.
6 months, that's a lot of time. Read 9 volumes.
Yes, we had many other things to do as well.
Right. So eventually the white paper was drafted, completed, and also forwarded again to the office of the president.
It was reviewed in cabinet.
Okay.
Yes, it was.
And that also took a lot of time.
No, not really. When the paper was ready, it was submitted to cabinet for review. The review took some time because we were reviewing every page of that white paper to get consensus. And where we disagreed, we discussed, and if there was no consensus, we found a middle ground. We wanted everybody to be on the same page insofar as the white paper was concerned.
Okay, so if now we can say that since the commission completed its work in March, the government made use of the whole 6 months that the Constitution gave it to publish the white paper. So therefore, the white paper was published in September.
I can't, yes, but yeah, it will be 6 months after the submission of the report.
6 months after
Yes.
March would be
September.
September 2019.
September 2019. Okay,
Yes.
yes.
So when the report was submitted and during the time of review, there must have been work being done with regard to the report by the Ministry of Justice, apart from preparing for the white paper.
Oh yes, simultaneously we were looking at plans of implementation of the white paper. Certainly.
But weren't you supposed to, or I'd say, didn't you want to have the white paper completed and then try to work on its implementation? Doing that simultaneously, considering it was going to be, the draft of the white paper was going to be subject to cabinet consideration. Wouldn't it then be wiser to just work on the white paper, present it to the president and cabinet, and then eventually work on its implementation?
That's one approach, but it's a longer approach. Sometimes you multitask, and if it turns out that a part of the white paper was going to be amended or changed by cabinet, then you adapt your implementation plan. But at least you have a baseline plan and you have the white paper. So you multitask, if you like.
Okay. I am keen to agree with that approach because it saves time and considering the bulk of what the ministry would have.
Because remember as well,
my issue here is that if the implementation starts and then eventually an issue that the white paper or the white paper might not be aligned to what the implementation or the implementation that had been done already, then how would such a mistake or such a conflict be remedied?
you were saying, so your assumption is that working on implementation would be preempting the final outcome of the white paper.
Exactly.
You know, the white paper is the president's white paper, right? It's the president's white paper.
Yeah.
And working on the implementation in consultation with the president was, I believe, not unreasonable, if I can put it that way, because notwithstanding cabinet discussions, the white paper is the president's white paper, right? That's what the Constitution says. And if I can borrow a copy of the Constitution, let me draw your attention to a specific provision in the Constitution about the white paper. If I can refer the committee briefly to section 203 of the Constitution on the publication of the report. Section 203 reads, on receipt of the report of a commission of inquiry, A, the President shall, within 6 months, publish the report and his or her comments on the report, together with a statement of any action taken or the reason for not taking any action thereon. And then the B goes on to talk about the refusal. So on any action taken. So the white paper necessarily should include action already taken by the president by the time of publication of the white paper. Are you with me?
I am.
So now, not all of the actions could be taken, especially because the recommendations, some of them are long term, some of them are medium term, some of them are short term. So you have to read into this provision the fact that some of the recommendations, depending on the recommendations, the president may not be able to take all action, but at least action that he could take, the white paper expects that action to be published in the Constitution, envisages that action to be reflected in the white paper. I'm not sure if you agree with that reading of the provision.
Let me say my own views. Slightly different from yours, but that's fine. So now, the actions taken would be,
ordinarily they should include.
yes, and in this instance, what were the actions taken?
I don't have the white paper at the top of my head right now, Council, but I believe the white paper should include some of the actions taken at the time.
All right, so the reason why I'm asking is we had to have the white paper at the top of the head. But the reason why I'm asking now is that you did propose some steps to be taken by the president, am I correct?
Absolutely.
Exactly, and you wrote to the president and to communicate these steps you believe that were necessary to be taken, isn't it?
Yes, that is correct.
So, these steps, what was the president's response in this? Did he accept these steps that you had proposed? And, Honorable Chair, I am referring the committee to folio 79 of the submission made by the Secretary to Cabinet. Yes, folio 79. These were the proposals that the Attorney General communicated to the President.
Yes, very.
Yes, so, Mr. Tambedou, these were about a handful of proposals were these the actions taken at the time? If Secretariat can also give Mr. Tambedou a copy of this so that he can refresh his memory.
Yes, go ahead, Council.
You've reviewed it?
Yes.
Honorable Chair, it's the committee at the, okay, all right. So, you had proposed a handful of cause of action. So my question now is, what was the response to this, and was your entire proposal accepted, or was it that just a few of them were accepted at the time and others were paused?
To the best of my recollection, I believe all were accepted.
Okay. And when all were accepted, then you moved immediately to the implementation of, or your office would move towards the implementation of this?
I convened a press conference to announce to the public these interim measures, and then the next step was to start to implement.
Okay, so that was the first, a press conference, and then, okay.
Implementation.
All right. And I think one of the, I'd say, biggest, one of the biggest cause of action here was, or the most impactful, I'd say, is C. The establishment of the Inter-ministerial task force.
Yes.
That should comprise of the Ministries of Justice, Finance, Land, Tourism, and Agriculture. And this was done. This task force, we can say, spearheaded one of the most important parts of the assets disposal process. Was the task force established immediately after this proposal was made?
It must have been established soon after. I don't know whether immediately after qualifies as soon after, but not long after.
Not too different. That's fine. And my question now here is, why were these the only ministries you thought were important, were you deemed fit to be part of this task force?
There were reasons for including these ministries, identifying them. As I said yesterday, asset recovery processes are usually a joint effort between the Ministries of Finance and Justice. So you can understand why finance was included, and of course, as the Justice Ministry, which spearheaded the process, was a natural thing to include the Justice Ministry. The Ministry of Lands was included because we're talking about landed properties throughout the country. We're talking about lands that were in different parts of the country, in the Greater Banjul area, etc. So lands obviously would be included. We included tourism because some of the lands that belong to the former president or purportedly belong to him, which were frozen, were within the tourism development area. And so therefore, we wanted to get the perspectives of the tourism ministry in our decision-making processes. And then finally, the Ministry of Agriculture, because some of the land that were frozen were agricultural land throughout the length and breadth of the country that Jammeh used, including the Parato farms. And so the Ministry of Agriculture was included in this committee. So these are the reasons why these ministries were identified as members of the committee.
Okay, so what was the ministerial task force supposed to do? I mean, you can take a look at your own proposal.
It says
the task force is mentioned on paragraph C, and
yes,
your proposal starts with
compile a comprehensive list. That's the one. I'm not sure whether there's a second line there, but it seems
for me. Or you have a photocopy.
The version that I have, maybe you can.
All right, let me read the first line for you then. It says, compile a comprehensive list of all the landed properties belonging to former President Jammeh. This would be derived from the
yes, from the JANNEH Commission report. That's right.
Okay. And then the second one was recommend the use for each landed property after forfeiture, that is, whether a particular property should be allocated for government use or to third parties or sold off, and the modalities for such sale. The third one being deal with third-party interests arising from claims of properties unlawfully seized by former President Jammeh, and the last one being announce to the public these interim measures and advise them to desist from interfering in any manner or form with the said properties and for affected parties to direct their petition or claims to the task force. Did the ministerial task force eventually hold a press conference or inform the public?
I was the one who held the press conference.
Okay. Is this different from the press conference held at the submission, sorry, at the publication of the white paper?
No. This press conference was held at the ministry.
At the Ministry of Justice?
Justice, yes.
Okay. It was held after by the way, how long did the task force sit or do its work before it concluded?
From when it hadn't concluded when I left.
Okay, so the task force was still
yes,
working.
absolutely. Yes, they ought to have continued working because we were dealing with these matters in phases.
In phases.
Yes. So from when the president approved the establishment of the task force, it continued until I left office in June 2020.
All right. So your proposal here, by the way, before I ask my question, before I get into your proposal further, there's a question I have on there. Eventually, you did say the president accepted your proposal. And so do we say that all these ministries listed here were part of the task force?
Except for the Ministry of Finance.
Okay. I was going to get to that because in the white paper, the Ministry of Finance is not mentioned as part of the task force.
Except for the Ministry of Finance. And I gave the reasons yesterday. You might not have been here, but when I made the proposal to the president at the time, I had actually, it had escaped me at that point in time until when it was brought to my attention by another colleague that the Minister of Finance was the subject of an adverse finding and the government had taken action in the white paper, and so therefore it would preserve the integrity of the process if we recused him. But the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Finance was included in the technical committee that the Inter-ministerial task force created to assist them.
All right. But this was before the white paper.
This was before the white paper was.
So the decision the president would have made with regards to the Minister of Finance at the time would not have been known to the task force.
Yes,
I mean,
which,
perhaps maybe the Ministry of Justice, since they were the ones drafting the white paper, but
yes, but which is why, as I said, I included the Minister of Finance at this point in time here, because I didn't know what the president will end up deciding.
okay. But when the president was excluded, sorry, not the president was excluded, when the
But remember also that by this time, the commission had already
Already
submitted
published,
its
yes, of
report
course.
and their recommendations were known.
exactly, all right, that is not in dispute here. So eventually, when the president made a decision with establishing this task force, that is the time the Minister of Finance was excluded, or was he added to the task force and then the realization dawned on on the members of cabinet and then he was excused?
This letter included the Minister of Finance at the time, as you can clearly see. And it was not long after that the matter was drawn to my attention in view of the recommendations contained in the JANNEH Commission report. And then, while no official communication was sent back to the president to rectify this, but it was done really, if I can say diplomatically, a message was conveyed to the Minister of Finance to recuse himself or to be recused from this task force. But the permanent Secretary of Finance was involved.
You know, in the technical working group or the technical support team for that task. You had mentioned yesterday and today as well that when it comes to asset recovery for the government, the Ministry of Finance is generally expected to be part of it. Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Justice, they would be the primary ministries for the government that would engage in this exercise. And now the Ministry of Finance, I do understand what you were saying about how the report at this time had affected or had mentioned the minister that was holding office at the time. But to engage in this process without the minister is quite an interesting thing. Even though his permanent secretary at the time was also sitting in the technical working group, but we've not gotten to what the work of the technical working group or the technical, what did you call them, a technical working group, or am I the one calling them that?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, so what the technical working group was doing at this point, was there, did the Ministry of Justice or the government try to see how to mitigate this point, or was it just, you know what, the Ministry of Finance, the Minister of Finance should be excluded at the time?
Just to maintain the perception of integrity of the process.
All right. Did this cause any issues for the task force eventually? Was there any problems that arose for the task force when it came to what way? Especially, we're talking about asset recovery here. At some point, finance talks of money would arrive, and then the task force would eventually perhaps, maybe once in a while, need the input of the Ministry of Finance. So how was that dealt with, or how were these issues handled?
That's why we had the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Finance as part of the technical committee.
The technical committee. So was it that any issue that the task force had to deal with, it would also share with the technical working group for technical support?
If the situation arose where we needed the input of the Ministry of Finance, certainly the permanent secretary would provide that, and they would provide that to the
technical
committee. Yes,
the technical committee. Okay. And also the technical committee. By the way, where did the task force have it meeting?
At the Justice Ministry.
At the Ministry of Justice. What about the technical?
At the Justice Ministry.
At the Justice
Solicitor General's office. Yes.
Okay. and all the permanent secretaries from all these ministries listed here and in the white paper were part of the technical team.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was, apart from this instance we just talked about, what else was the technical working group or the technical committee supposed to do?
Their role was advisory,
Advisory.
because as ministers, you know, it's difficult for ministers to go through of properties sector, look at what the JANNEH recommended, and
Sorry to interrupt. It seems your mic is, the connection is being lost. Can you just give us a minute so that we can change it?
you don't expect cabinet ministers at that level to go through list of properties, to go through the recommendations made by the JANNEH Commission with respect to those properties, etc. So we needed our group of advisors to basically do the heavy lifting for us. So they would go through and they acted as an advisory body. That was their mandate.
All right. You mentioned earlier that when the committee, the task force, sorry, started its work, it did so in phases. What was the first phase, and how did the task force come about identifying phases that it would utilize to do its work?
There was no particular order of work, if you like, and we didn't even convene many physical meetings because it's difficult to bring 4 cabinet ministers in a meeting, in a regular meeting. There are other engagements, of course, in addition to cabinet, etc. But we had our inaugural meeting. That's where we discussed how we were going to approach this issue. And so we, I believe, when we decided to go through the property, this was after the new receiver was appointed. We decided that what we would do is to go through the recommendations, go through the list of properties, and then deal with the different categories of issues that were contained in the JANNEH Commission report. And so there was no particular order of things. We went through, so our first step was to go through the list of properties to decide at that point which ones we could or could not sell, but while also entrusting that responsibility to the technical committee to also go through the list of properties and to advise. So that would be the first order of business, to identify which properties at that point were to be sold, which ones were to be retained for government use, which ones were to be dealt with as a third-party claim, etc. So we decided in our first inaugural meeting to adopt that approach.
Very well, and that's eventually the approach that the task force worked with.
Yes.
But before we get into landed properties, the eventual work that was done by the task force as well, or the subsequent work that was done by the task force. In your proposal to the president, you also included that immediately everything identified by the commission, being movable or immovable assets, should be forfeited to the state.
Upon unfreezing by
upon the unfreezing of the high court order.
Yes.
This letter was submitted in May, about 2 months after the commission submission. And then it was about a month to the expiration of the order of the High Court. So did the Ministry of Justice approach the High Court to make an application for the order to be set aside, or did you just wait for the order to expire?
We waited for the order to expire.
Okay, all right. Now, in the course, now that we've actually gotten to the order expiring, that is also how Miss Augustus Prom's term as a receivership expired as well, which is also mentioned in the Commission of Inquiry, or there was a recommendation regarding that firm and the dealings with these assets in particular, the expiry.
I would like to spend a few moments on this point.
Oh, I was just going to say let's move on because I don't.
No, it's an important point, and here I would request for a copy of the Anti-Money Laundering Act, Council, please.
For me, it's not an issue. I believe.
For me, it is. Please.
Oh, well, I direct the conversation.
No, I know, but this is not adversarial. This is
I know,
inquisitorial. We're
you know-
establishing the truth, and this is an important matter. I think it was raised by Honorable Member for Joshua on the first
Yes,
day.
that's
but
why.
it's an important matter for me. I think the public is watching. This issue was raised in public, and a lot was said about it. And I think this is a unique opportunity to establish the facts and clarify for the public. I think this committee, this hearing is in the public interest.
Of course,
So-
that is what we're doing. But I
Yes.
thought that the issue,
No,
in my view, was already dealt with
No.
properly on the first of the hearing.
Mr.
your
Chair,
hearing.
I would really want to spend a little
I
bit
will
of...
leave this to Honorable Chair, even though we do have a lot of ground to cover. We
I
still
won't
have a lot
spend
of
more than
ground.
5 minutes on it, as usual. But I would,
I was thinking you'd say a minute. 5 minutes?
if I may have a copy of the Anti-Money Laundering Act, please.
Okay. We can grant you the opportunity.
Thank you.
To add this.
Because this issue has been the subject of, in fact, it has caused a lot of
Yeah.
grief for me and my family. And I wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to set the record straight because the public is watching.
That's okay.
Thank you.
We are doing fact finding, so we want to establish the facts.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do we have that act?
Yes,
It was given to me the first day.
Secretariat, I believe, unless it was returned to the library.
I can use...
Secretariat, okay, all right. Library must have taken their copies. They won't let their.
Yes, that was. Mr. Chair, I requested for 5 minutes to delve in this issue, as I said, because unfortunately, it was the basis upon which a lot of things were said to me and about me. And the first one being that I had unlawfully terminated the services of Augustus Pom and receiver and appointed Mr. Alpha Barry, who was my friend. I will say it as it is because that was what was said. Unfortunately, in a report which was carried around the country, causing a lot of personal pain for me. And I want to clarify this and set the record straight. The appointment of Augustus Pom by the High Court was done in conjunction with the application to freeze the assets of the former president. It was the Ministry of Justice. It was I who engaged Augustus Pom and went to court to ask the court to appoint Augustus Pom for me as receiver. And this application was done pursuant to Section 51 of the Anti-Money Laundering Act, which reads, where a competent authority investigating a criminal conduct, a money laundering offense, or a financing of terrorism offense has reasonable grounds to believe that any money or property relating to the criminal conduct, money laundering offense, or financing of terrorism offense is held or is under the control of any person, the competent authority may apply to the court in accordance with subsection 2 for a restraint order prohibiting the person from disposing or otherwise dealing with that property except in such manner as may be specified in the order. Then subsection 3 of section 51 says, the court shall make an order under this section if it is satisfied that there are reasonable grounds for making the order. So this subsection 3 gives the court the power to make the order. Subsection 4 says, the court may, in granting an order under subsection 3, give directions as to, and B says, the appointment of a trustee or receiver for the proper administration of the money or property during the effective period of the order. Subsection 8 of the Anti-Money Laundering Act says as follows. An order made under subsection 3 of the Act shall cease to have effect at the end of 6 months following the time the order was made, if the person against whom such order was made has not been charged with a criminal conduct, money laundering, or financing of terrorism offense within the period. So this section clearly says the order that the High Court would give under subsection 3, including the appointment of the receiver or trustee, shall cease to have effect at the end of 6 months following the time the order was made. And which is the position of the minister at the time, my position, that Augustus Plum's receivership tenure expired at the end of the last 6 months that the court gave. So therefore, he was never terminated. He was never sacked. His tenure as receiver expired together with the order that the High Court gave. It says, shall cease to have effect. And the wordings are very clear, and this was the ministry's interpretation of this, and this is why we allowed Augustus Plum's tenure to elapse, to expire in accordance with subsection 8 of section 51 of the Money Laundering Act. And anybody who said that Augustus Plum was terminated is spreading falsity. Thank you.
Just one quick question. Sure. To that. So, Mr. Tambedou, I thank you so very much. I mean, this is about law. I'm sure the committee will look into these particular provisions in the Anti-Money Laundering Act order to also establish exactly what the law says. But if I should ask, at what point did the Minister of Justice, or should I say the Commission, had an engagement with Augustus Plum regarding the payment of commission, 10%? At what point did you have?
We negotiated with Augustus Plum. I actually negotiated with Augustus Plum, and we agreed on the 10% commission fee, which is what Augustus Plum was paid throughout its receivership tenure, from the beginning to the end. There was a proposal by the Commission of Inquiry for Augustus Plum to be paid 3% of the receivership fees over the 2 hotels that Social Security owned, Ozone Bay and Sunset, which Augustus Plum rejected. I think Mr. Plum's evidence was clear. But as far as the Ministry of Justice was concerned, Augustus Plum was paid the full 10% from the start of the receivership to the end of the receivership. Yeah.
right, very well. Mr. Tambedou, I did say earlier that I wanted us to look at other issues that ensued for the Ministry of Justice and look at other assets before we get to land. But I think now that we've started talking about a task force, and the task force its main role was basically to handle issues of land. So let's just close issues of the task force up to the time you left the Ministry of Justice, and then we can move on to other assets that the reports of the commission dealt with, or the commission dealt with in general. We have your proposal at hand. And by taking a quick look, we can see that the president accepted the proposals made at the time in May.
It was accepted in writing, by the way.
Yes, so, and work started. For the establishment of the task force, we can see that the white paper also, of course, as it's reacting to as the president is reacting to the recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry, he's also informing the public through the white paper of what has been done and what is yet to be done. And what had been done at the time was that the task force was established, and what the white paper states is that the task force, or what the role of the task force was, to handle third-party claims.
Including to handle third-party claims.
Okay. Consequently, the government has now established an I'm reading paragraph 44 of the white paper. The government has now established an inter-ministerial task force at both the ministerial and technical levels to handle all such third-party claims. Okay. So, what was the task force supposed to do? Isn't this, to my mind,
this was
and
part of what they were supposed to do.
Okay. What else was the task force supposed to do?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean. It was supposed to carry out the proposals that I had put to the president, including identifying properties that would be sold by the receiver.
All right, which included identifying or selecting property to be sold.
Yes.
Very well. And eventually, the task force did identify property to be sold.
Yes, indeed.
Can you recall the properties that were sold during your time as Attorney General?
The number, you mean, of properties?
Number?
I cannot recall the properties. I mean, I don't know these properties. I know them by addresses. They're somewhere. Most of them were in the greater Banjul area, let me put it that way. In and around Banjul, in the KMC area, and some probably in the West Coast area as well. There were 44 in number as at that time, but some of the sales were subsequently cancelled for one reason or another.
Very well. So I want us to discuss sale of land. I know the president was reacting to the commission's recommendation. And of course, there are recommendations that the commission made that the white paper, or I'd say the president through the white paper, did not accept fully or did not take on to implement fully.
There were a few instances.
Yeah.
If I were to give a percentage, there would be no more than 1 or 2% of the recommendations.
Okay. So why was sale of land part of the recommendations accepted this time?
One of the primary objectives of the Commission of Inquiry, the JANNEH Commission, was to recover lands, and it was to recover as much of the monies that were misappropriated by the former president as possible. It's one of the explicit objectives reflected in the terms of reference of the Commission. So the government wanted to recover as much of the monies as possible, which is why the government decided to sell the properties. I would like to see where this is going.
Mr. Tambedou, I'd like to think that you know where this is going. My concern here is about the selling of land.
Mm-hmm.
Why would the government of the Gambia engage in the selling of land?
Why wouldn't the government of the Gambia engage in the selling of land? That would be my response.
No, the nice thing about where I'm sitting is that I get to ask questions and nobody gets to ask me questions.
Well, you see, that is a misconception of a fact-finding process, because it's not an adversarial, it's not meant to be an adversarial process. It's
exactly why when a question is put to the witness answers.
Yes, it's meant to be inquisitorial. So that means we're all interested here to establish the facts for the committee. And so if you think that your perspective will help to establish the facts, you shouldn't hesitate to share that perspective.
Definitely, where I think context is important, and I believe we've been doing that since we started, we do provide the context.
I'm even saying where you
generate that question from.
Where you think your engagement will help establish the facts.
Sure, I think at this point I'm going to rely on your or the committee would rely on your vast knowledge.
There's no rule that prevents the government from selling land. Let me put it that way.
All right. So what rule gives the government authority? I don't want to use that word, but power to sell land?
Well, if it is not prohibited,
why does it derive its authority to sell land from?
Well, if it is not prohibited, it is allowed. And remember the principle of the presumption of regularity, Council, when it comes to state action. You're getting into very complex legal arguments, and I'm not sure whether this is the forum for that.
Why wouldn't this be the forum for that? This is the people's house.
It's a fact-finding process. It's not. That's why there's a separation of powers. That's why when we have legal issues, we go to the courts.
Very well, but in finding of facts, this, as you're saying, there's no rule. You said, correct me if I'm paraphrasing here, if I'm wrong. You said there is no rule that stops or prohibits the government from selling land. Am I right? That's what you said.
That's right.
Exactly. To you, that's a fact. Because the laws of this country are silent on it.
It's a legal argument. So we are expressing legal opinions here. That's why I said whether this is the forum for that.
But the actions taken by the government and even the commission when doing its work and coming up with its recommendations, we're doing so within the ambit of the law. So therefore, we cannot separate the legal basis of certain action taken by the government from this fact finding. I mean, we're talking about asset disposal, which you believe right now, according to you, if I interpret what you're saying correctly, is that in disposing of assets, the government made use of powers, though not explicitly stated by law, but still within the ambit of the law. So therefore, in doing this fact finding or executing the mandate of this commission, we cannot escape or cannot say, let's deal with facts and not deal with law. We cannot escape the law in this instance.
The law that we will
It's
deal
the law that is following us, actually, even if you want to run away from it.
No, Council, I have a different view. It's the law of opinions here. And what I'm trying to say is, if a party who was affected by the government's action only that party could have challenged the government's actions. And where would they have challenged those actions? In court. Because the exercise you're getting into now will lead us to a situation of where you have an opinion, the government has an opinion, and this is not an adjudicatory poll. There is no one to adjudicate on the law.
Are you saying the government, your opinion is the government's opinion?
The Attorney General is the principal legal advisor of the government. In fact, the government is bound by the advice of the Attorney General. So what I'm saying is, the proper persons to raise what you're raising now are those who were aggrieved by the government's decision to sell property. And that means, and if they are aggrieved, well, the proper forum to go is to go to court and challenge that process. But here, you will provide opinion, I will provide opinion, and there is no adjudication.
Oh, Mr. Tambedou, I wouldn't have gone back and forth with you on this.
No, I'm just saying.
But I just want to say that, let me just state this, for both our benefit and for the benefit of the record, that in this exercise, the National Assembly can form an opinion.
Absolutely, I perfectly understand that.
Exactly. So you cannot say that, therefore, we're not going to get into a legal argument or back and forth. But you cannot say that forming of opinions here would be wrong, or looking at the law here would be wrong.
What I said
was, the law is, even if you don't want to follow the law is following the committee, because it's the basis of the work of the commission, and eventually what the government relied on to do to execute the asset disposal and implement the white paper.
Yes. No, what I'm saying, Council, is that it's exactly what you just said. It now comes down to a matter of opinion. The differences of opinion. But where does that lead us? Because the opinion that you may have on this is not necessarily conclusive of this matter. And like I said, there is the presumption of regularity, and if there is an aggrieved person who is affected by the government's decision, then that's why the courts exist. They can go to court to challenge what the government did, and then it's at that forum that the matter will be resolved. Again, I like to give analogies. I'll give this setup as an analogy. I gave it earlier, I'll give it again now. I know that there was a motion for the legal team to assist the select committee, so I am not focusing on that. My focus is, what if I were to propose that the enhanced role of council in this setup, even with a motion by the National Assembly, because the Supreme Court can strike even acts of the National Assembly, let alone motions. And what if I were to raise the argument that this process, as it is, was unconstitutional? Now that would be a matter of opinion for me. You may have a different opinion. This is why you have this setup. But because of the presumption of regularity, we have to continue with this setup because that presumption is there. But it wouldn't stop me or anybody else outside if they wanted to challenge this setup. Simply because the legal team are not members of the National Assembly, neither are they members of the National Assembly Select Committee. The point I'm making here is we can have different opinions about different things, but because of the presumption of regularity, you don't unless you want to go to court, but you don't raise them, because when you raise them, they become only a matter of opinion. And right now, this may be only opinion for me, but if I went to court and say, Council Agisenika and Diba and many were acting ultra-vires the Constitution because they are not members of the National Assembly Select Committee, and therefore they couldn't have been posing questions to the witnesses.
And I'm sure at that point the court would refer, or in its deliberations and ruling, would refer to Section 1082 of the Constitution.
And that is why
To say that Parliament determines its own procedure. And that is why this motion that establishes this committee has mentioned the technical working team.
and you may be right, that's what the court may say, but my point is it will be the court to say it.
Exactly,
That's
but
my
this
point.
is already established by law, the Constitution.
It did not only mention the technical team.
Exactly. I think we should give Honorable a copy.
No, I'm just
A
saying.
member of the technical team brought a copy of the motion, and I said it's not relevant. There's no need to give it to the witness. But I think
No, there's no
we're getting
need.
to that point.
There's no need. I'm just raising this for the sake of
I understand your analogy, but I don't think this analogy you're using. Maybe use another one and leave the National Assembly.
I can challenge the constitutionality of this setup, not the committee, but the legal team. I'm just saying in theory. I'm saying in theory.
Are you trying to encourage members of the public to
No,
go
not
to the
at
Supreme
all.
Court to challenge?
No, I'm
Or
just
are you
saying-
waiting for the? It looks that is what it's looking like now to me. Is you're telling the public wait for the report and challenge it.
I have every
in the court.
confidence. I have every confidence in this National Assembly, as I have always had from day one. I'm just trying to make a point that the legal arguments that you're raising cannot be resolved in a forum like this. Just like the legal arguments I am raising. I'm just saying, when it's about legal arguments,
Your own arguments are dealt with by the law, by the Constitution.
according to you,
Not according to me. Take a look at the Constitution. I believe you have a copy there. But what I'm saying now, with your issue, you're relying on the silence of the laws of the Gambia when it comes to sale of land. Even though the State Lands Act is very clear on what the government can do when it comes to land.
if the Constitution was that clear, it wouldn't have given the Supreme Court the power to interpret it, because it would have been very clear.
Of course.
Exactly. So
But
the-
it's already clear.
okay.
I think we can move. I think if you're making an analogy, don't use the committee. Because we have a motion that is very clear, the Constitution is clear, Parliament determines its own procedure. So,
But you know, Council, just for the public and the members here, you know, even if Parliament can determine its own procedure, the law is also clear, the Constitution, that Parliament can enact laws in this country. But it doesn't stop the Supreme Court from striking down parliamentary laws, right?
if
So
they're
even-
inconsistent with
Well, yes,
national justice,
that's my point. So my point
It
is,
doesn't just say the Supreme Court can wake up one day and then say,
my point
well,
is,
let's declare this act.
no, my point is, even though the Parliament can do this, there are checks and balances. And the role of the court is to check the excesses of Parliament, if you like.
Parliament
I don't want
also
to get
checks
into all of
itself.
that. I don't want to get into, all I'm saying is, let's not get into a legal debate as to whether the government had the power to sell or not. There was nothing stopping the
When it
government.
comes to asset disposal, we cannot avoid this question, Mr. Tambedou. We cannot avoid it. And since you are saying that you are trying to encourage the public to take the report of the parliament, this committee to court, then
No,
maybe
no.
perhaps
I'm not doing that.
perhaps you are also encouraging parliament to maybe take this question to
No,
court
no,
as well.
I'm not doing that. Is it your position that the government didn't have the power to sell land? Is that your position? Is that the proposition you're making?
My question is, I did not make any assertion or did not take a position.
Okay.
My question is, when it came to the issue of selling land,
Yes.
on what law, rule, or what was the government relying on in order to do this? Because I'm sure anytime government would rely on policy to execute certain actions or to carry out certain actions and activities, government sometimes relies on the constitution to carry out certain actions. Government relies on acts of National Assembly to carry out certain actions. So in this event, what was the government relying on? That's it. I just want an answer.
The government was relying on the fact that there is no law prohibiting the government from selling land. And council, again, for the sake of the committee and the public, again, for the sake of the committee and the public, you know as well as I do that the laws of the Gambia are not just restricted to the statute and the constitution. The common law forms an integral part of Gambian law. You agree with that, right?
Of course. It's not something I can deny. It's the constitution.
Exactly. And the common
Just
law.
like section 182.
That's right.
Something you cannot deny.
And the common law is pretty much law that was established by presidents through the courts. And that's why I said, if there is an aggrieved party who disagrees with the government's position on selling land, let them go to court. It was up to them to go to court. That's where the court will adjudicate whether the government had that power or not, which would ultimately form part of the common law here. So people are free to go. I recall at the commission set up stages, there were 1 or 2 issues about the commission, and we encourage people to go to court.
Sorry, which commission?
The JANNEH commission.
Okay.
We encourage people to go to court, challenge these things, because it also enriches our jurisprudence as a country. And that's also part of the development of our society. So if people are aggrieved, they can certainly go to court. That's where it will be adjudicated.
Okay, so now we've established that government did not rely on law, but rather on common law principles, on basically an act passed by the National Assembly, but common law principles to sell land.
No, we rely on the fact that there is no law prohibiting the government from selling land.
So basically, you rely on something that does not exist. Basically, you took advantage of the fact that all the legislation in this country that deal with the administration of land are silent on the sale of land. Perhaps maybe this is something the National Assembly should look into.
So you're also saying that the JANNEH Commission made a recommendation that was not based on law?
The JANNEH Commission recommended for forfeiture.
Forfeiture and sale?
And sale.
Yes, to restore. So you're saying the JANNEH Commission also made a recommendation that
Like I said, I am not, it's not for me to take a position here. This is a question I have put to you.
there are
Perhaps when
precedents.
members of the commission come back, the shadows come back, and other commissioners, or maybe even the legal counsel, it's a question we could discuss with them.
Absolutely, I'm sure they will.
On what's the basis of
It's an
their
interesting,
recommendation.
it's an
It's an
interesting
interesting
legal
thing.
question.
I do agree. So now, you have not answered my question. We're still
Which
on
is
what did the government rely on to sell land? You said common law principles.
the
So I
recommendation,
said-
the recommendation of the commission.
Okay, so now we've said the silence of the law.
No, that's
We've set that aside. We've set aside common law principles.
No.
We are now on the recommendations of the
no.
commission.
You said on what did the government rely to sell land? It relied on the recommendation of the JANNEH Commission to forfeit and sell land.
Okay.
And you said on what law was that done? I said there is no law that prohibited the government from doing so.
All right, but also the JANNEH Commission had made recommendations that the government did not consider.
Like which ones?
It would be tedious to get into these.
Recommended the government
know,
did not consider. The
Okay, so
government
maybe consider is the wrong word, or the recommendations that the government, through its white paper,
the government did not
did not
accept.
accept.
The minority of recommendations to start
Yes.
with, and even in those cases, the government provided a reasoned opinion. I can give you, I still recall the majority of those in my head. We provided a reasoned opinion
Right.
for that procedure.
We will get into that, but we're still on this question, right? And if the government chose certain recommendations to say we are not accepting this, this is our reasoning, why didn't that extend to land?
because the government believed that they could accept land, the recommendation to sell it, and there is no law that stops the government from doing so.
That's it.
Right now, that's what's coming to my head. I may have forgotten other relevant law, but right now these are the two. I certainly know there was no land, there was no law that prohibited the government from selling land. So I'm sure you'll agree with me that when there is no law prohibited, then by deduction you are allowed to do that. But it was premised on the recommendation of the JANNEH Commission.
And the silence of the laws of the Gambia.
Let's not say the silence. Where the law doesn't want you to do something, it's very explicit about it. It tells you not to. If the law doesn't tell you not to, then the police can't charge you with a crime if you do. I'm sure you know that.
Of course, but I still maintain that the government relied on the silence of the laws of the Gambia.
I was just
Perhaps
saying,
that is a lacuna that the National Assembly needs to.
I'm not sure it's a lacuna. It just requires, probably I'm caught off guard. I wish I was given advance notice. I would have tried to remember some of the reasons, some of the reasoning at the time, but I certainly recall that there was no law that prohibited from selling land.
All right, but just to try to move on from this issue, we still have a lot of ground to cover. The State Lands Act does state what what the government of the Gambia can do when it comes to land.
The State Lands Act is for the administration of land in the country.
Exactly.
Yes.
Which in administration of land, but does not, and its implementation or the minister that the act refers to is the Minister of Lands, and does not give the Minister of Lands power to sell land.
But council, these properties we're talking about here are properties in the context of asset recovery. They are not land within the meaning of land in the State Lands Act. I'm sure you know that. What is the definition of land within the State Lands Act? Because you have to look at that definition. And that's why I said this may not be the forum to raise these issues.
Shed some clarity for the record. Give us some clarity.
As in,
when you're talking about the land that the JANNEH Commission identified and investigated.
oh no, I said these were properties in the context of asset recovery. And I'm saying that the State Land Act, as I understand it, deals with the administration of land in the orthodox sense. Land which needs to be leased, land which is freehold, etc. So it may be helpful to look at the definition of land in the State Lands Act. And I'm saying I don't think the properties that we're talking about here were envisaged to be captured within the meaning of lands in the State Lands Act. But again, this is a legal exercise. It's like we're in court, counsel, and we're not in court.
We're in the assembly.
Yeah,
but if the land is forfeited to the state, doesn't it become state land? I mean, it becomes land owned by the state now.
But that's, in your definition, you have had time
I did
to
not
go.
give you a definition.
You have had time to go through these issues. I haven't. But I know that the properties that were recommended to be forfeited and sold in the context of asset recovery could not have been land within the meaning envisaged in the State Lands Act.
All right. So,
can you share the definition of land in the State Lands Act with the committee? You don't have that?
sure.
What does it say, land?
Let me just give you the definition. State land is defined as meaning all land referred to under Section 4 and all lands which have been or may hereafter be acquired or on behalf of the state, by or on behalf of the state, for any public purpose or otherwise, however, and all such lands so designated by the minister.
Was there a designation here?
There's no designation, but any land
For any public purpose?
acquired by or on behalf of the state. For any public purpose or otherwise. It does not stop at public purpose.
Yes. Yes. So that's why I
So
said
you cannot say whether it's for public purpose. If it's not for public purpose, the government should sell it.
But this proves my point. You know as well as I do that these are legal arguments that would be canvassed in court by parties appearing before it, and the parameters of the issues would have been flushed out by the. So that's why I said this exercise is
Sure, we will
illegal.
we will move on, but I hope the people you have encouraged to challenge the report of this committee through its composition and its support team would also be encouraged to go to court on this issue.
Oh yeah, I would be. I enjoy advocacy, and I think this is how we develop our societies.
I agree. I think this is a convenient point. We can take a short break for a moment.
Perfect.
All right.
At least 15 minutes, so we can proceed again. Thank you. Thank you.